Hello and welcome again to another sound design session on the MC-707. I'm your host, Phoenix Song, and today we're going to be going into how to design bass using the Zencore engine. So this might also be useful to anyone who has a Zencore engine and wants to sound design basses from scratch. Please like and subscribe to this channel so you can hear more about the next videos I'm doing. I'll do more videos on the MC-707 and many more synths. Here are some things that I did in prep for this session to design some basses, and there are a range of different tones. Let's start. And okay, so the first one is kind of an acid style bass. It's not necessarily TB303, but it has some of those elements, and I throw some distortion on there to give it a little bit more tone. And then I've set up the filter, and the mod is set to resonance, so you can play with that live. Pretty cool. This next one is a very punchy bass. It might be sort of an Alpha Juno type tone, but I think it goes a little bit farther because of my EQ sculpting, so it really punches out. So and then this one, the third one, is really like a Juno bass using chorus. And the last one is kind of a Moog style bass, but while it sounds good, I want to point out some things later in this course about that and the filters in it. So let's go into this, and instead of walking through these, I might be able to do that later. I'm going to start a new one. So we start from scratch, and we'll go through some important features of sound design here. So as always, you hit Shift and Sound to go into the editor for the tones. And you start out with the VA saw engine. And as I've made a reference video before this about all the oscillator types, I'll put a link here so you can go watch that. So as you sweep this, the pulse width, you make each of these different oscillators have all sorts of different potential in terms of shapes and things like that. So I feel that the Zencore engine is really good for oscillators. It has so much juice right there. And if you don't want just analog style, you've got all these other ones too, especially that I go into the super saw. That is super nice, powerful super saw noise. And let's go back to one back is PCM. So many different types of PCM waves you can use. You can mix those in. I've done that a lot to make bass tones because sometimes I want a mix of this hybrid sound of real basses and VA basses and things like that. So it's really fun to do that, and that's one of the strengths of the Zencore engine to do that. So let's start with that, and we'll open up another VA here. Do some fine tuning there, and change that. Now if you want to add a little PWM, what it's doing there is obviously it needs a LFO to do that. So it's always going to pull on LFO2 here for the rate, so you can slow that down here. I'm not going to. Nice. And already we have something that you could use. Go down an octave. That's nice. For convenience, maybe what I would do is take both of these down an octave or one of them down an octave. For example, it's typical to take the square wave and take it down an octave first and leave the saw up for more of the harmonic content of a bass. Yeah. So you could just start with 2 oscillators, make a bass patch. That's often what I've done, but you've got 2 more after that to build up the tone even more. Okay, so let's try this down an octave too. That'll just give us what we had. Yeah, I like it up an octave, so let's leave it there. The fine tuning there is important to give it a little bit of detuning and thickness, because if they're right on the same, it doesn't sound as analog. Okay, let's talk about analog. So if you're on the control here, the main thing, you could just turn the octave down there, poly. Let's turn it to mono here. Turn some portamento on. Bring that down so it's not so slidey. So that's good for bass sounds, lots of... Okay, and then analog feel, often I'll turn that up a bit. For a bass patch, you don't want it too wobbly. For a pad, you could turn this up more, but maybe about 4. I've seen a lot of bass. Add some thickness, kind of like a VCO, but without getting too sloppy for this type of thing. Okay, so, well, let's do a little bit more here first. Okay. Yeah, triangle can often be good as like a lower octave, so let's build that up, bring some volume in. You're really not hearing it too much, but it thickens up the sound a bit for a bass. Cool. And sometimes I give it just a little bit of rounding off of the attack, because especially if you're playing on these pads, it's nice to do that to make it sound a little less artificial. That's workable. Okay. Okay, often what you'll want to do is sculpt the amp, e.g. On this one, I don't find it needs it, but we could take the sustain quite a bit down, and then you're going to hear the decay a little bit more. Okay, so let's talk about the filter. The filter is super important for an analog bass design. So I feel the strengths of the Zencore engine are the oscillators are super powerful. I find there's a little bit of weakness in some of the filters here. And so let's change the type to the VCF and slope 24. Flat's pretty good. I think Roland's nailed it on type JP, which is for their Jupiter type synths. So this I have no complaints about. But on these two, the Moog type filter and the Prophet type filter, I've tried them a lot and I just don't like them. They don't have the tone that I would look for. And I've got a DSI synth, the Tetra, and I really like the filter on that. It's one of the reasons I keep that one around, because that filter is so smoking. And got a couple different Moog synths here. I think what the problem is if you look, this is all you get for the types. So you got cutoff, resonance, envelope, and the typical key follow slope. So it's got the controls you want, but what it's missing is a drive control, because what you want to do is be able to, on a Moog or a Prophet, you'd like to add some pre-drive, like some drive to the filter before it gets there. And so I just don't find a way to get that tone with these two filters. So that's one thing I wish they would improve, is add another parameter for pre-filtered drive. And that would give these filters some new life. I think that would, an update on these could be in order to give us some tone. So I'm gonna sounds all right, but yeah, what I'm looking for is a little bit more of that grit from these filters. So that'd be one request I'd have, if they could make that an update. I would love that, and I would talk a lot about that. But I find this filter is quite nice. Roland knows what they're doing with their Jupiter filter, so I use that one a lot. And so if you notice on the patches that I built here, we've got kind of a TB303 sound, Alpha Juno right here, and then Juno bass. So all of those sound really good. So if you're making bass tones on that, if you could stick to your Roland type basses, you're probably going to be more happy on this Roland product. So I bet it could do a really good SH-101 bass. I'm sure it can. All right, and a little aside here, what I almost always do on a bass patch is under knob assign, I change the C2 knob, the mod knob, to resonance. So I can control that live. And I found if you put the knobs to 12 o'clock here, you will have, it basically cancels out the knobs and goes back to whatever settings you had in your patch. So that's an easy way to get back to the default state of what you've designed. Okay. So, you know, we've got an EQ, so I use it and boost up some low. This is a really nice EQ because, you know, you can change the, it's parametric. You know, you could change the frequency that you're boosting. And if I'm feeling there's any lack of character in the tone from the filter, what I do is I use the mid-range to make up for it. So I would give a boost there. Yeah, and already you start having a more retro, vintage synth sound with a little bit of a mid-range boost. Cut the high a little bit. Maybe not. I like the crispy harmonics. Yeah, there. Take it down an octave. Okay. So I complained about the filter a little bit. And one way to make up for that in tone is if you use an effect, sometimes because you want your bass to be punchy, you don't want a wash of effects and things like that, though the Juno chorus in here is really nice for that. You know, you're looking to give it a little bit of extra tone. So sometimes I use this enhancer. Okay, definitely not like that. It's a little too high. I enhance the low one. But we've already got the EQ, so I've done it right on some patches, but let's move on to some other things I'm looking for. Here's your Juno chorus. Let's turn that noise down. So yeah, right there, that can take you into Juno bass territory really quick. And if you hadn't noticed, one thing I missed is I always stopped here because I was like, okay, that's all the Juno choruses. But if you keep going, look, we've got the JX choruses too, which is super nice. So that is super nice to have those in there too, because that's definitely a different sound than Juno chorus. So don't forget about those. That's another bonus. It's not just Juno chorus, it's JX chorus. Awesome. I wouldn't use the 2+1 or 1+2 on the Juno chorus, but I would use 1 and 2. Moving along, let's try some other things like overdrive. Seems a little bit too crunchy, so more of a guitar tone, but the distortion, okay, that's too much. Let's turn the drive down, and turning the tone down gets it more bassy, but look, this amp switch is on. I turn that off because I'm not trying to emulate all these guitar speaker cabs. Turn it down a little bit because we're not trying to destroy the tone here. We're just trying to give it a little more girth. It's nice, but it can overpower your synth tone really quick here. So tone fattener is good. This one I like. The saturator is good. Warm saturators, even nicer. Spoke too soon. Oh, it's because the low gains turned like that. So a lot to play around here. We could spend all day playing around with different effects on it. Compressor's great too, but let's turn it off for a bit and just move on. But that would be a way to, take somewhat limited tones in terms of the sculpting here, which actually you've got a lot of control. But for bass, you just want this type of tone, and the filter's super important. So to give it a little bit of juice, use the effect to sculpt the tone. And if you want to reuse the bass as more of a lead tone, turn on some delay and reverb. I find if you've designed a nice bass patch, taking it to those upper octaves doesn't necessarily translate like it would on a real analog synth. Just has a little bit harder time with some of the higher frequencies when it's doing that. But yeah, I can punch on the bass. Okay. Yeah, I use easy mode edit on basses because I don't need 4 different filters running around and all sorts of complexity. So I've talked about how using the partial mode is super important on other things, but this is not one of them. Hope that's been helpful. It's a little basic, no pun intended, compared to some of the sound design I do, but it's good fundamentals to have if you are worried or scared about going into sound design on this because of this interface. It can be really easy. You've got a nice little screen here to tab about, so it's not like menu diving totally. So have fun. I think it's a good tool. It definitely, for the form factor, if you don't want to have to carry around another synth to a show, it's a good sound source for bass. Definitely, I've talked about drums. Can do some great drums, so use it for that. Please like and subscribe to the channel so you hear about these next features I will do on the MC-707. Thanks for watching, and have a good one.